Lord B and Jester talking about everything from crystals, vibrations, comics, technology, cartoons, magic, meditation, herbal remedies, etc. Whatever comes to mind, just going on tangents and rambling on.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to what we call the Riff, the realm of infinite frequencies. This is the Tangent Podcast, Episode 3, Multiverses and such. I'm Jester D. Wild One, and the other half of my hosting crew is Lord B. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well today.
How's the road?
Hard.
Hard? Do the lions just keep going by?
Just a zippering along.
Zip, zip, zippity-doo-dah-day. Hey, I got some news for you, Lord B. I'm not sure if you heard about this. Tucker and Dale versus Evil might be coming out with a second one.
Truly?
Yes, truly. They're in thoughts.
That's fun.
That's awesome. I love that movie. Anyway.
That was pretty entertaining. Tries to scare you, but makes you laugh.
Right, I didn't know what to expect at first when I watched Tucker and Dale. Like, what is this? And then it just got comical and over the top.
Mm-hmm.
So today we're talking about multiverses and stuff. Infinite multiverses, other multiverses, and how they kind of coincide with pop culture. Into the Spider-Verse. How does it compare to the comics?
My response would be it's a little different because in the comic books there was a different scenario. I mean, it's a spoiler alert towards the movie if you haven't seen it. But in the comic books there was a human mutant named Madam Web, real name Cassandra Webb. And she was introduced in the Amazing Spider-Man number 210 in November of 1980. And she drew them in for, reasons. I don't know offhand at the moment. But in the movie, they go kind of a different route, kind of a evil guy with a sad story. And the universe they're in is not the same one as the Spider-Man MJ universe we are used to, which is kind of cool, because some of the bad guys have a little bit different take on each other. But they basically have a reactor that, when activated, rips apart dimension and time, and an accident occurs, and a bunch of the Spider-Mans are pulled into that universe, which is, pretty cool concept. It's pretty fun. It reminds me of a couple other things, too.
Yeah, I've never
is
really
there
heard
anything
of
specific you're thinking of?
Madam Web. I want to know more about Madam Web. I've never heard of Madam Web, and you were, kind of shocked at me that I haven't.
Well, it's the whole...
Give me a Reader's Digest version of it.
Reader's Digest version. She's a human mutant. It's Marvel, so, you got the X-Men and all that stuff. But she basically, as far as I remember, this is right off the top of my head from the 1990s, it was in the cartoons and everything, too. Madam Web, she pulls the Spider-Mans in. She's watching them. She's, kind of spidery also, obviously. And she... kind of takes charge, sends a Spider-Man to another universe where there's another Spider-Man. If he needs help, can pull them out of time, like Spider-Man 2099, from the future. He's got a bunch of tech in his suit, kind of like the new Spider-Man in the Avengers, where he's got the tech because Iron Man made his suit. But she is basically kind of lives outside of time in her own little pocket dimension.
Really?
Just kind of keeping an eye on everything and pulls them in when they need help and throws them out, which is it looked like they tried to include that idea of a pocket universe in the movie when they showed you the Peter Parker of that universe, his little basement lair where his Aunt May knew the story, knew the truth. And some of the suits were kind of Easter eggs from all the different comic books and different scenarios and different timelines of Peter Parker. In the movie, they had. Go ahead.
I just think they did an amazing job on Into the Spider-Verse. It's so detailed, and apparently it took a little while to make that.
I mean, me personally, being, somewhat of a fan, was kind of hesitant to see it. Heard good things from a bunch of people. You demanded that I watch it a little while ago, so, I got around to it. And
1 out of 5 stars, what'd you give it?
I fucking loved it. I loved it. I give it a 5.
5 stars, nice.
Maybe a 4.8 just because of the stuff it's lacking that I knew about, but people who don't know about it, I mean, they did what they needed to do. They touched on it. They included it, and they left it, I mean, at like every Marvel movie, they left it open for possibility of either a second one, a live-action one. I guess Tom Holland was talking. He would be interested in it. I'm just curious who he's going to be. If he's going to take the place of Miles, I kind of feel like that should not be what happens.
Maybe they should get a new Miles, for that adaptation.
Well, on the topic of just Spider-Man in general, how cool would it be, and I've seen this on the internet too, so it's not my original idea, but how cool would it be if they Tobey Maguired as Uncle Ben, and then multiverse with Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland as Spider-Man?
I think that's an intelligent idea. I like that. I'd see it.
I mean, they could easily add, more characters, but create almost a different multiverse version. They could do it from the other spectrum.
They should hire...
include Madam Web, something
right.
like that, and do it like the story like in the comics.
I think they should seek out the pig that played Babe to play Spider-Ham.
Then they could use Charlotte Webb as Madam Web. That'd be perfect.
So, do you? Here's a question for you that I didn't ask you beforehand. Spider-Ham, the name, and the whole Simpsons spider pig, like, did Simpsons just kind of steal that from under their belt? Like, they could have used Spider Pig, and instead they used Spider-Ham, which I think is really funny, but kind of morbid.
Well, did you see his origin story?
Yes.
Like it was really quick, but Spider-Ham was a spider that was bitten by a radioactive pig. That's why he's Spider-Ham, because he's a spider that became a ham. That's so he's not Spider-Man. He's not Spider-Pig because he wasn't a pig bit by a spider. See what I'm saying?
That's
why
too
he's
smart.
Spider-Ham.
Holy shit! I'm like crying over here.
It's epic. I loved it. I laughed my ass off when I saw it.
It's been a little bit since I've actually seen Into the Spider-Verse. I should have watched it before this, but you just brought that up, and I just saw it all in my head.
It was hilarious. They went quick because they introduced. To anyone listening, just to spoiler it up a little more, they did origin stories for some of them, and they did the backstory. But then they introduced like 3 or 4 all at once, and they just said backstory real quick. But if you're paying attention, you get the gist of it, but some of them were very, very good, but they were real quick, Like, they explained it in like 5 seconds when other ones had like a 10-minute scenario of the backstory, so it's kind of cool.
The animation was just so well done in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really liked it, especially when the dimensional molecules didn't want to exist in our dimension, and their bodies would twitch out and stuff. I mean, I think they did a great job on showing that.
I really like the guy who does the voice of the lazy Spider-Man. I forgot his name in it.
That's Peter B. Parker.
Yes, he was my favorite part of the whole movie. He just got me every time.
The sweatpants? The gut?
Yes.
Fucking
That's
hilarious.
Me. That's me. I could be that Spider-Man.
it connected the everyday guy.
Yeah, I definitely felt a connection to that Spider-Man.
But it also brings me to another thing, multiverse in general. To anyone out there who's seen the movie The One with a
Jet Li
non-infinite multiverse, I believe it was 125 Earths existing in a multi-dimensional, realm. You could travel from one to the other, and that includes like a whole nother level to a multiverse, because it basically says that you are linked to every copy of yourself. Some of them you exist, some of them you don't, some of them you're a girl. Yeah, there's 124 versions because in some you don't exist. It's kind of how they explained it with the Jet Li character. He didn't exist in all of them, but in the ones he did exist, the one guy worked for the company that could travel through and policed the dimensions of the multiverse, and he, to ruin the movie, became corrupt and realized that he accidentally killed one of his and realized he was suddenly a little stronger. And then there's this mythical factor to it that, if you're the only one of you, you're a god. So he went, you see where it's going. He went through and killed all the incarnations of himself in all the different universes or other dimensions of the Earth. And
until there was only 2 left.
Yes, and then they wouldn't let it happen.
But what they didn't realize is that everybody in the multiverses gets stronger when you kill yourself, which isn't suicide, it's murder. If you go to another multiverse and kill yourself, it's murder. But every other person got stronger and stronger.
That's true. But then there's also if you will, call it the grandfather rule, which is another theory on time travel, it creates an interdimensional thing where you travel back in time and accidentally kill your grandfather. You won't disappear because, in theory, you just created another timeline. So you would still exist, but there would be a different story of how you came about because in the paradoxical sense, if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, you wouldn't have existed to go back in time to kill your grandfather. So none of it would have ever happened. It's the same concept as if you try to invent a time machine to save somebody, you save them, you never would have invented the time machine. So you never would have went back. You never would have invented it. You never would have saved them. If you save them, you never would have made it. It's a whole paradoxical thing.
Which is a lot to think about.
Exactly, and the only way to properly explain it is if you created a new timeline by going back in time. You altered it. The only way you could save them is if in the timeline you came from, you invented it to go back and save them. That incarnation saves that person, but now there's a whole new timeline, so then it all becomes relative. You invented it, you went back, you saved them, you can't go back to your original timeline because it doesn't exist anymore, is one theory.
Right, because you just come back to your timeline, but
yeah,
what you did just changed a different one that you can't see.
You can't go back to because you just altered it.
Right.
But in the same kind of sense, that's the dimension or paradoxical reality that you invented the time machine in. So just because all that happened, in theory, you still wouldn't have invented the time machine. And, I mean, if we want to talk about time machines real quick, there's a whole nother theory about time machines, that once you invent a time machine, you can't go back to before the time machine existed. But if you build a time machine, let's say 2019, and 2015, you could go back to 2025, you could go back to 2019. But if you go back prior to that, the molecules that made that time machine didn't exist in that form. So you can't go back to prior to when it was put together because it wouldn't exist prior to that moment.
It wouldn't just pop out of the atmosphere and be like, boom, time machine.
Exactly. It wouldn't exist because the molecules that are in that might have existed in a can. Now you go back in time, there's no time machine. Like, let's say it's able to get you back there. Once it gets there and the molecules come out of the time bubble that it created by leaving, the future to go back, it would now not exist as soon as you got there. You might appear, but you might suddenly also do the same thing because you didn't exist at that time, so you might disapparate, if you will.
And you're just going to be stuck there waiting for 2019 to hit.
Well, if you were able to go back, yes.
That actually brings me to kind of a reality sense that if I think me and you tried to make a time machine, it would just turn into that episode of Big Bang Theory where they bought the time machine and they just went pew 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 pew.
Or the scene in Napoleon Dynamite where you buy a time machine off eBay and really it just fries your testicles.